Okay, what we're going to show you here is how to properly splice a Cat5 cable. Now, of course, the best is to just put connectors on the end and a coupler, but in this case, we have a security camera that originally we had spliced in a cable so that it was one long continuous run, 100 feet or so, to the network switch. Well, now we're going back to putting the original connector back on. So we don't really want a connector in the middle here. We just want to splice the wire back. And so first thing you want to do is we had to make a clean cut and make sure that all your little wires in between are all the same length. Cut it clean on this end, cut it clean on this end, cut the jacket off. Be careful not to nick the wires inside when you're doing that. Get your heat shrink on in advance, or you're going to have find yourself in a predicament where you just have bare wires exposed. I did a couple of them already, but I'll go through the process of the next one, and you can see what you're going to end up with, if we can get a focus here, is there we go. The wires being heat shrinked together. So here we are, we're going to take on this yellow one you see here. So first thing we're going to do is strip off just a little bit on each end. Okay, so where is it? There it is. So you can see there's just a little bit stripped off. If I can get this thing to focus for me. It's not much. There we go. I did that using looks like 26 gauge. I used my little really fine wire stripper here, and the 26 gauge is that third hole from the left. So that would seem to be the one for that yellow, well, for all of those wires. So you see, you just take off a little tiny bit there, and then you want to tin the wires. Okay, so here's the wires tinned. See the little solder on there on both ends. And I did that using a very fine point soldering tip. And my focus doesn't always work right here. And you want to make sure that's really clean when you do this. So you want to, use your tinning paste and get that really clean. By the way, see this little switch box I made? I got two switched outputs. Here's my soldering iron. These are 6 amp because the switches are rated at 6 amp, and then unswitched at 15 amp. Little notation here, no equipment ground on these outlets, but that's okay as long as you're aware of that. This is very handy. I just made this with a old vacuum cleaner plug cord and some hardware from the hardware store. Okay, anyway, back to this. So now we got those tinned. Now you got to get a small piece of heat shrink on there. This is the heat shrink I'm using. And I know I'm having focus issues here, but this heat shrink is 3/64 heat shrink. It's so tiny I use these little manicure scissors to cut it. And you want to get your piece of heat shrink on there. Now you need to get your wire aligned. It's going to be really hard to see. I'm going to do my best to show you this, but using 2 of these little vices, I try to see how I get the wires perfectly aligned. Then we're going to hit that with solder without anything moving. Okay, so we get it soldered. And again, you want to use a really clean tip. I always like to brush it off with this bristly stuff and put a little paste, and flux paste there. This isn't just your Home Depot, plumber's paste. This is soldering. This is for soldering irons. You can pick that up where you get electronic stuff. So anyway, you get that on there. You get that soldered. Now you need to put the heat shrink on there and shrink it. Okay, so we get our heat shrink positioned, and then we're going to heat shrink it. This is very tiny, so I like to use this little heat shrink gun. I have it set completely on low, and I get in there, make sure I got that one sort of isolated as best I can, and then shrink it. Okay, so that one done, and just like all the other ones you see there, we're on to the next one. I'll show you how we finish this up. And by the way, for these little small wires, I like to use this. This is the heavy stuff here. This is the fine stuff. This is a 0.6 millimeter. It's a very fine solder. So, let me zoom in a little bit. So there they are. So now we need to put the big heat shrink, that piece of red. I have white, but red, I happen to have that piece. I'm not concerned about the color. Let's put that on there. So now for the larger shrink, it's best to use the heat shrink gun. So this thing is pretty cool for doing the real small stuff, these little tiny wires. But then we get into the bigger shrink. This tends to run a little cooler. Well, there's two settings, whereas this is just really hot all the time. I like to use the cooler setting unless I specifically need it to be that hot. Okay, so anyway, just before I do the final shrinking on this, I wanted you to see, how nice this all comes together. I just sort of squeezed it, just with 2 fingers, just squeezed it down, and you can see that we're going to have a really nice repair there. We're going to have the original waterproof connector back where it belongs on our security camera. Yeah, and there we go. Now, this was just your standard, vanilla heat shrink. If you really wanted to go that extra step, you could use this dual wall. This is like marine grade. This stuff is thick. It's a lot thicker. And when it cures, when you shrink it, you have to wait. At first it's soft, but then it gets really hard, and it has an adhesive, so it creates a sort of a hard shell rather than this flexible shell, and with an adhesive that keeps it watertight. But in this case, I have already the shrink overlapping both sides, and then each wire is individually heat shrinked inside of there. And this is all going actually inside an enclosure, so this is fine for what we're doing here. And the housing that I'm talking about that it goes in is right here. Goes right in there. Pretty cool, huh? We actually have one camera sticking out this way. and one camera sticking out this way. Just one more thing I wanted to mention. This is actually a hot air gun. You can take this attachment off and it becomes a little mini torch, but the point is you don't want to use a torch on shrink tubing. I mean, you can, but it's a little aggressive, too aggressive for my taste. You actually want a hot air gun. This is a nice one here. I think I got this on eBay or Home Depot. I don't remember, but this is like I said, it's just hot air, not a flame torch. The torches tend to be a little bit too harsh on the shrink for my taste, although it'll work. I mean, I've seen people use lighters, matches, you know. But anyway, for what it's worth. Okay, so I just want to show you the one I did a couple years ago with the other heat shrink. This is actually the one that came off the camera that I showed you at the beginning of the video. But anyway, this is done with the heavy wall shrink and the adhesive. This has been out there working for years, never a problem. But the other advantage to the adhesive is that it also adds a lot of strength. This thing is, I mean, this is really strong. So that's another advantage to that heavy wall marine grade adhesive shrink tubing. Okay, so I'm making a video here really just for the Yahoos out there. Here is a dome camera in which I had just cut the cable off of, okay? And here is the cable that came off of the camera, and the wires inside this cable all the way down the length are not twisted. I'll strip this down in front of the camera to show you. This is the piece that came off of that camera, and I'm working on this. I don't know if we can see this on camera, but if we look inside this connector, the wires are not twisted. They're not twisted pairs. They're pairs, but they're not twisted pairs. Okay, so you may know what you know from reading your books, but don't learn everything there is to know in school. There's nothing like having 45 years of hard knocks experience. Nothing can take the place of that kind of knowledge. Okay, so here's a splice we did. I just did this on a pretty good sized spool of cable, and we're going to run some tests on this just to see what we actually have here. Okay, so first thing we're going to do is we're going to check the wire map just to make sure I did get it wired up correctly. And so we're measuring, and it shows that we in fact do have a perfect straight 4-pair. Okay. Next test is our TDR. TDR tests the integrity of the Ethernet cable and tells you the length, an approximate length of the cable. It checks for improper terminations, opens and shorts, and as I said, the cable length to within a certain tolerance. So let's measure that, see if we have any problems. And TDR is saying open at 47 feet. That's fine. That just means that it's a 47-foot length cable. And we can see that we're getting consistent results across the pairs. So that's fine. Okay, so this TDR graph is going to, it should be, usually there's a spike really close to the connector, and then you want it to be as flat-lined as possible. So let's go ahead and measure that, and let's see what we got. And here's our graph. As you can see right here, that is beautiful. That's a beautiful, beautiful line. Okay, so, and there we are, 49 feet, 47 feet, 49 feet. Pretty good. And since we're not running, we're not interested in PoE, DHCP, external IPs, ping, or any traffic on the line, we're going to jump right down to the bit error rate here and do a measurement. Now here we have a lot of different settings. I'm going to start with the simplest, 10, 64, random 100, which should go pretty quick, actually. If I can get it to measure. I have to put a loopback connector on here. Forgot. Okay, let's measure that. And there we go. So here you see no errors. As I said, that one goes pretty quick because we're running at everything minimum. So let's step it up a bit. And let's just see what we get. Here again, takes a little longer the more you test it, but just for the Yahoos, we're going to show you. And we could go all the way up to a gig, but it's a long test. Maybe I'll just do it. I'll pause, come back, because you can see how long this one is taking already. Although we've already got a reading here of no errors, so it's just doing a little homework in the background. The reason I wanted to show you these specific tests was because when I had comments enabled, I had Yahoos telling me that, oh, we're going to have packet losses and all kinds of stuff. You know, so yeah, that's fine. You can think what you want.